In this video, we are going to be bringing the students' data into our Power BI data model. We'll connect to our Dataverse student context table. We'll see that there are two ways for us to bring this data into our data model: direct query and storage mode. The first is a live link to our Dataverse table, whereas with storage mode, we actually bring the data into our Power BI model, and that allows us to perform different calculations. But the downside is that the data is only up to date to the time that it was last refreshed. Once we've connected to the data, we're going to use Power Query to make some simple table transformations, and then we'll finally load the table into our data model. From the perspective of the Power BI report creation stages, we're actually going to be touching on the get data, transform data, and model data stages. So let's move over to the exercise and start connecting to data. I'm in my library report, and the first thing I'm going to do is to go to get data. If I select the drop down, I've got some options here. As we're connecting to Dataverse, we could just select the Dataverse option here, but I'm going to show you that if we actually select more, we can see all the potential places that we could connect to. I'm going to search for Dataverse and select on Dataverse. Select connect. I'm now going to need to sign in to my Power Up environment. Select sign in. Select the correct username. Enter my password and then sign in. I can now select connect. And it's going to offer me all of the environments to which I have access to inside this tenant. I'm going to select the drop down here. And I'm going looking for the contacts table. Let's take a look at our model-driven app to see why. I'm in my model-driven app on my students table, but if I look at the URL at the top, I can see that it's actually called contact. If I go onto the books table, I can see that actually the name of this table is PU book. So we're going to switch back to Power BI and we're going to connect to the contacts table. I can scroll down to this table, or I can simply select contact. Select on the contact table. I can get a preview of what's happening in that table, and I can then transform the data. At this point, we have the choice between import and direct query, and because we don't want the live connection, we are going to go with the import option. And you can learn about more using the URL shown. I'm going to select OK. At this point, a new window opens, and if you have multiple screens, then make sure you go looking for this screen. I'm going to make sure it goes full screen. We call what's on the screen a query, and the tool that we're using is generally referred to as Power Query. A query is both a connection to a data source of some kind, along with all of the transformations that we need to do in order to get into a shape that we desire for our data model. The steps that a query has taken are shown on the right-hand side, and there are a wide range of transformations that you can do from the Home, Transform, and Add Column tabs. Transformations can be as simple as changing data types, removing unwanted columns, finding and replacing data, in addition to getting data from other queries that you've created, creating new columns, and much, much more. If I scroll from left to right, I'll see that there are an awful lot of columns available to me. There are many ways of choosing these columns, and the simplest way of doing it in this case is for us to hold down the Control key and select the columns that we actually require. I need the contact ID, and I'm going to scroll across to the right. Hold down the Control key, and then we're going to select on first name. Scroll across. We're going to go with last name. We can bring in the full name as it's an available field. And I'm going to look for the email address as well. Select on the email address. I can review the columns that I've actually selected by scrolling back. And I can right click on one of them, and then I can remove other columns. I can change the name of this table from contact and make it student. And as I'm happy with this, I can select close and apply. As you can see, it is loading the data into our data model, and very soon we'll be able to see the data. It goes through a series of stages, which includes evaluating, as you can see here, creates a connection in the model and loads the data to the model. The data has now been loaded, so we can actually take a look at this data. I'm going to take a look at the table view. We can now see our 10 students. We can also look at the relationships model view, and we can see that we have one table. Let's go back to the table view for a moment. We can see the contact ID for Raj Patel starts with 2B04. Let's see what that looks like inside our model-driven app. I'm in the contacts and I can see my students, so let's select on Raj Patel. If we look at the ID at the top, we can see our 2B04 reference. In fact, we can see the whole of the GUID, the globally unique identifier. Note that it will be different in your environment because you have a different record for Raj Patel. And it's important to have an awareness of this because when we create relationships later on, we will be using this field. I'm back in the report. I can now select File and then Save. We've come to the end of the video on connecting to students' data. We connected to Dataverse. We saw that we had direct query versus storage mode. We made some simple transformations to reduce the number of columns that we were looking at, and then we loaded the query into our data model. The students table is just one of the tables that we'll be using in our Power BI report. I'll see you in the next video.